good evening, and welcome. Tonight, I invite you to settle in, turn down the lights, if you dare, and let your imagination wander into the shadows. What you're about to hear are not just stories, but confessions, warnings, and memories that have haunted real people long after the sun came up. These are the kinds of tales that linger in the corners of your mind. The ones you remember when the house creaks at midnight or when you catch a glimpse of movement in the dark. These are 10 real haunted house stories that will make you sleep with the lights on. Let's begin with a story that comes from a quiet suburb in Ohio, where the ordinary became extraordinary in the most chilling way. Story 1. The House on Willow Lane. When I was 12, my family moved into a 2-story colonial on Willow Lane. It was the kind of house that looked like it belonged on a postcard: white siding, blue shutters, a big oak tree in the front yard. My parents were thrilled. The price was almost too good to be true, and the neighborhood was safe, filled with kids my age. But from the first night, I knew something was wrong. It started with the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but these were deliberate, heavy, and always at the same time, 3:13 a.m. Every night, I'd wake up to the sound of someone walking up and down the hallway outside my room. My parents brushed it off, but I could see the worry in my mom's eyes. She started leaving the hallway light on, but it didn't help. The footsteps continued, and soon, other things began to happen. Doors would slam shut on their own, even when the windows were closed. My little brother's toys would move from one room to another overnight. The air in the house felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was coming from the closet. I lay there, frozen, until the sun came up. The final straw came a few weeks later. My mom was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when she saw a reflection in the window, a tall, thin man standing behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. That night, she packed our bags, and we left. We never went back, and the house sat empty for years. Sometimes, when I drive by, I see lights flickering in the windows, even though no one lives there. Story 2. The Red Room. Our next story comes from a woman named Elise, who grew up in a small town in Maine. Her family's house was old, built in the late 1800s, and had a reputation for being quirky. But what Elise experienced went far beyond creaky floors and drafty windows. When Elise was 8, her parents converted the attic into a playroom. It was painted a cheerful yellow, filled with toys and books. But there was one door they never opened, a small, red-painted door in the far corner. Her parents told her it was just a crawl space, nothing to worry about. But Elise couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from behind that door. One rainy afternoon, curiosity got the better of her. She crept up to the red door and pressed her ear against it. She heard faint scratching, like fingernails on wood. She ran downstairs, heart pounding, and told her mom. Her mom laughed it off, but that night, Elise dreamed of a woman in a red dress, her face hidden by long, tangled hair, standing in the attic, whispering her name. The dreams continued for weeks. Elise started sleepwalking, always ending up in front of the red door. Her parents finally decided to open it, hoping to put her fears to rest. Inside, they found a small, empty room, except for a single, child-sized chair facing the wall. The air was ice cold, and the walls were covered in faded handprints. After that, Elise refused to go into the attic, and her family eventually moved out. The new owners tore down the attic, but the red door was never found. Story 3. The Shadow in the Nursery. This story comes from a young couple, Mark and Jenna, who bought their first home together in rural Pennsylvania. The house was perfect, 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, and a nursery for their newborn daughter, Lily. But from the moment they moved in, Lily wouldn't sleep through the night. She'd wake up screaming, her eyes fixed on the corner of the room. At first, Mark and Jenna thought it was just colic or nightmares. But then they started seeing things, too. Shadows would flicker across the walls, even when the lights were on. Toys would turn on by themselves, playing eerie lullabies in the middle of the night. One evening, Jenna was rocking Lily to sleep when she saw a dark figure standing in the doorway. It was tall, with long arms and no face. She screamed, and the figure vanished. Desperate for answers, they set up a baby monitor with a camera. The next morning, they watched the footage in horror. At exactly 2:47 a.m., a shadowy shape moved across the nursery, stopping at Lily's crib. Lily sat up, reached out, and the shadow seemed to lean over her before disappearing. Mark and Jenna moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. Story 4. The Whispering Walls. Our fourth story comes from a man named David, who inherited his grandmother's house in Louisiana. The house was beautiful, filled with antiques and family photos. But David soon realized he wasn't alone. It started with whispers, soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from the walls. At first, David thought it was just the old pipes or the wind. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They called his name, begged for help, warned him to leave. David tried to ignore them, but the voices followed him from room to room. One night, he woke up to find his bedroom door wide open. He heard footsteps in the hallway, then saw a pale, translucent figure standing at the foot of his bed. It reached out to him, its mouth moving silently. David ran from the house and never returned. The house remains empty, the whispers still echoing through the halls. Some houses seem to carry the weight of their history in every floorboard and faded photograph. For Olivia, moving into her gray-tants Victorian home in upstate New York was supposed to be a fresh start. She was a recent college graduate, eager to make the old house her own. The first few weeks were filled with painting, cleaning, and exploring the attic's forgotten treasures. But there was one thing she couldn't bring herself to touch: a large, oil-painted portrait hanging in the upstairs hallway. The portrait was of a stern-looking woman in a black dress, her eyes following you no matter where you stood. Olivia's aunt had always said the painting was part of the house, and that it should never be moved. Olivia tried to ignore it, but at night, she'd hear footsteps pacing the hallway, always stopping in front of the portrait. Sometimes, she'd wake to find the painting slightly askew, as if someone had tried to take it down. One evening, after a particularly long day, Olivia decided to cover the portrait with a sheet. That night, she was jolted awake by a loud crash. She rushed into the hallway to find the sheet on the floor and the portrait hanging perfectly straight. But now, the woman's expression had changed, her mouth twisted into a faint, knowing smile. Olivia moved out the next morning, leaving the portrait exactly where she found it. Story 6. The Locked Room. In a quiet neighborhood in Oregon, the Miller family moved into a charming craftsman house with one peculiar feature: a locked door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The previous owners had left no key, and the realtor claimed it was just a storage closet. But the Millers' youngest son, Ethan, became obsessed with the door. He'd sit outside it for hours, whispering to someone on the other side. Strange things began to happen. Toys would disappear, only to reappear in front of the locked door. At night, Ethan would talk in his sleep, repeating the same phrase, "Let me in." One evening, the family heard a loud banging from upstairs. They rushed to find Ethan standing in front of the door, his hand pressed against the wood, tears streaming down his face. "She wants to come out," he whispered. The next day, the Millers hired a locksmith to open the door. Inside, they found a small, windowless room with peeling wallpaper and a single, broken doll lying in the corner. The air was ice cold, and the walls were covered in childish drawings, stick figures with hollow eyes. After that, Ethan stopped talking about the door, but he never slept in his own room again. Story 7. The Man in the Mirror. For some, the most terrifying hauntings are the ones that blur the line between reality and nightmare. When Daniel and his partner, Chris, bought a fixer-upper in Chicago, they expected a few surprises: leaky pipes, creaky floors, maybe even a mouse or two. What they didn't expect was the man in the mirror. It started innocently enough. Daniel would catch glimpses of movement in the bathroom mirror, shadows that didn't match his own. Sometimes, he'd see a figure standing behind him, a tall man in an old-fashioned suit, his face obscured by darkness. Chris laughed it off, but Daniel became increasingly unsettled. He started avoiding mirrors altogether. One night, after a late shift, Daniel went to brush his teeth. As he looked up, he saw the man standing directly behind him, his face inches from Daniel's own. The man's eyes were empty, his mouth twisted in a silent scream. Daniel spun around, but the bathroom was empty. The next morning, the mirror was shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floor. Daniel and Chris moved out soon after, unable to shake the feeling that the man in the mirror was still watching. Story 8. The Crying Child. Some hauntings are subtle, a chill in the air or a fleeting shadow. Others are impossible to ignore. When the Ramirez family moved into their new home in Texas, they were excited to start fresh. But from the first night, their daughter, Sophia, complained of hearing a child crying in the walls. At first, her parents dismissed it as imagination. But the crying grew louder, echoing through the house at all hours. Sophia would wake up sobbing, insisting that the child was calling her name. The family tried everything: white noise machines, therapy, even a priest, but nothing helped. One night, Sophia disappeared. Her parents found her in the basement, standing in front of a bricked-up doorway, her hands pressed against the cold stone. She was whispering, "It's okay, I'm here." The family had the wall examined, and behind it, they found a small, hidden room. Inside was a child's bed, a few broken toys, and a faded photograph of a little boy. After that, the crying stopped, but Sophia never spoke about it again. Story 9. The Phantom Dinner Party. Not all hauntings are terrifying. Some are simply strange, a glimpse into another time. When Margaret inherited her aunt's old farmhouse in Virginia, she was charmed by its history. The house was filled with antique furniture, dusty books, and the lingering scent of lavender. But every Sunday evening, Margaret would hear the sounds of a dinner party: laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint strains of music. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the sounds grew louder, more distinct. One night, she followed the noise to the dining room and saw a group of people seated around the table, dressed in clothes from another era. They were laughing, toasting, and completely unaware of her presence. As she watched, the scene faded, leaving the room empty and silent. Margaret came to accept the dinner party as part of the house's charm. She even set a place at the table every Sunday, just in case her spectral guests decided to stay a little longer. Story 10. The Unseen Roommate. Our final story comes from a college student named Jamie, who rented a room in an old boarding house near campus. The rent was cheap, the location perfect, but from the start, Jamie felt like she wasn't alone. She'd hear footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, and the faint sound of someone humming. One night, Jamie woke up to find her desk chair spinning slowly in the corner. She watched, frozen, as the chair came to a stop facing her bed. The next morning, she found a message scrawled on her mirror: "I see you." Jamie tried to laugh it off, but the incidents continued. Her belongings would move, lights would flicker, and she'd wake up to find her blankets pulled off the bed. Jamie started leaving the lights on at night, unable to shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. She moved out at the end of the semester, but sometimes, when she's alone in her new apartment, she still hears that familiar humming. If you're still with me, you might be feeling a little uneasy. Maybe you've glanced over your shoulder, or noticed the way the shadows in your own room seem to shift and stretch. That's the thing about haunted house stories. They don't just belong to the people who live them. They have a way of following you, of making you question what's real and what's just your imagination. But the stories you've heard so far are only the beginning. Sometimes, the most terrifying hauntings are the ones that leave scars you can't see. Let's return to Willow Lane for a moment. After the family fled, the house sat empty for years. But eventually, a new family moved in, drawn by the same low price and quiet neighborhood. They didn't know about the footsteps, the whispers, or the man in the window. For a while, everything seemed normal. But then, their daughter started talking about her friend who lived in the closet. She described him as tall and thin, with a sad face and a voice that sounded like the wind. Her parents thought it was just an imaginary friend, until they found her sleepwalking, standing in the hallway at 3:13 a.m., whispering to someone only she could see. The family moved out after a year, and the house remains empty to this day. Neighbors say they still see lights flickering in the windows, and sometimes, if you walk by late at night, you can hear footsteps pacing the hallway. Contrast that with Margaret's farmhouse in Virginia, where the haunting was almost comforting. The dinner party became a ritual, a reminder that the past is never really gone. Margaret found herself looking forward to Sunday evenings, setting the table and listening for the laughter and music. She even started leaving little notes for her spectral guests, thanking them for their company. It was as if the house itself was alive, holding on to its happiest memories and sharing them with anyone willing to listen. But not all hauntings are so benign. For some, the presence in the house is a constant source of fear and anxiety. Take the Ramirez family in Texas. After they discovered the hidden room in the basement, Sophia stopped hearing the crying child. But she also stopped speaking altogether. Her parents took her to doctors, therapists, even spiritual healers, but nothing helped. It was as if a part of her had been left behind in that bricked-up room. The family eventually moved, hoping a new environment would help Sophia heal. But to this day, she refuses to talk about what happened in that house. Then there's the story of Olivia and the portrait in the hallway. After she moved out, the house was sold to a young couple who planned to renovate. They removed the portrait, intending to donate it to a local museum. But when the movers tried to take it down, the frame shattered and the canvas split down the middle. Inside, they found a faded letter written in a spidery hand. It warned, "Do not disturb her rest." The couple decided to leave the portrait where it was, and the renovations were never finished. The house is now abandoned, the portrait still hanging in the hallway, watching over anyone who dares to enter. Some hauntings are tied to a single object, a piece of the past that refuses to let go. In the Miller family's house, the broken doll found in the locked room became a source of fascination for paranormal investigators. They claimed the doll was a conduit, a vessel for the spirit of a child who had died in the house decades earlier. The room was sealed off, and the house was eventually demolished. But the doll was never found, and some say its spirit still lingers in the neighborhood, searching for a new home. The man in the mirror, too, left a lasting impression. After Daniel and Chris moved out, the new tenants reported similar experiences, glimpses of a shadowy figure in the bathroom, mirrors shattering for no apparent reason. One tenant even claimed to have seen the man's face reflected in a window, staring back at her with empty eyes. The building was eventually converted into offices, but employees still report strange occurrences, especially after dark. Jamie, the college student, tried to put her experience behind her. She moved into a new apartment, made new friends, and focused on her studies. But the feeling of being watched never quite left. Sometimes, she'd wake up to find her desk chair turned toward her bed, or hear the faint sound of humming when she was alone. She started sleeping with the lights on, just in case. These stories are more than just ghost tales. They're reminders that the past is never really gone, that the places we call home can hold on to memories, both good and bad, long after we've moved on. They're about the things we can't explain, the moments that make us question what we know about the world. But perhaps the most unsettling thing about haunted houses is the way they force us to confront our own fears. Are the footsteps in the hallway just the house settling? Or is there something more? Is the shadow in the corner just a trick of the light? Or is it watching, waiting? The answers may never be clear, but one thing is certain. Once you've experienced a haunting, you're never quite the same. As we move forward, remember that these stories are not just about ghosts or spirits. They're about people who loved, lost, and tried to make sense of the unexplainable. They're about the ways we cope with fear, grief, and the unknown. And they're about the power of a good story to keep us awake at night, wondering what might be lurking just out of sight. Sometimes, the most chilling part of a haunted house isn't the ghost itself, but the way it changes the people who live there. Fear can be a slow poison, seeping into the cracks of daily life, turning comfort into suspicion and routine into ritual. For some, the haunting becomes a test of faith, sanity, or even love. Consider the story of Mark and Jenna, the young couple from Pennsylvania. After they left their home, they struggled to rebuild their sense of safety. Jenna developed insomnia, unable to sleep in silence, always needing the hum of a fan or the glow of a nightlight. Mark became obsessed with researching hauntings, desperate to find a logical explanation for what they'd seen. Their relationship was tested by the invisible scars left behind. Even years later, the memory of the shadow in the nursery lingered, a silent presence in their new home. They never spoke of it to their daughter, but sometimes, when Lily woke up crying, Jenna would find herself searching the corners of the room, just to be sure. Contrast that with Margaret, who found a strange kind of peace in her haunted farmhouse. The dinner parties became a bridge between past and present, a way to honor the history of the house and the people who had come before. Margaret started researching the names and faces she glimpsed at the table, piecing together their stories from old letters and photographs. She discovered that the house had once belonged to a prominent family, known for their lavish gatherings and generous hospitality. The echoes of their laughter became a comfort, a reminder that not all hauntings are born of tragedy. But for others, the haunting is a wound that never heals. Olivia, who fled the house with the portrait, struggled with nightmares for years. She'd dream of the woman in black, her eyes following Olivia through endless, twisting hallways. Therapy helped, but the fear never fully faded. Sometimes, when Olivia passed an antique shop or an old house, she'd feel a chill run down her spine, as if the portrait was still watching her, waiting for her to return. The Millers, after discovering the locked room and the broken doll, decided to move far away, hoping distance would bring relief. But Ethan, their youngest, became withdrawn and anxious, afraid of closed doors and dark corners. He'd draw pictures of the doll, always with hollow eyes and a sad smile. His parents tried to help him move on, but the past clung to him like a shadow. They learned that some things can't be left behind, no matter how far you run. For Daniel and Chris, the man in the mirror became a symbol of everything they couldn't control. They tried to laugh it off, to rationalize the fear, but the experience left a mark. Daniel developed a fear of mirrors, covering them with towels or turning them to face the wall. Chris became more protective, always checking the locks and windows before bed. Their friends teased them, but the fear was real, a constant reminder that some things can't be explained away. Jamie, the college student, found herself drawn to stories of the supernatural, searching for answers in books, podcasts, and online forums. She connected with others who had experienced similar hauntings, finding comfort in their shared fear. She started writing about her experiences, turning her anxiety into art. The humming in her new apartment became a muse, a reminder that even the scariest stories can be transformed into something beautiful. And then there are the stories that never make it into the light. The families who move out in the middle of the night, too afraid to speak of what they've seen. The children who grow up with secrets, never sure if what they remember was real or just a dream. The houses that sit empty, their windows dark, waiting for someone new to cross the threshold. What ties all these stories together is the sense of the unknown, the feeling that there is more to the world than what we can see or touch. Haunted houses remind us that history is alive, that the past can reach out and touch the present in ways we can't always understand. They force us to confront our deepest fears, of being alone, of being watched, of being powerless. But they also remind us of our resilience. Every person in these stories found a way to move forward, to reclaim their lives from the grip of fear. Some found comfort in ritual, others in research, and still others in community. They learned to live with the unknown, to accept that some questions may never have answers. As you listen to these stories, you might find yourself wondering, what would I do if it happened to me? Would I stay and fight, or would I run? Would I try to explain it away, or would I accept the possibility of something beyond my understanding? There are no easy answers, but perhaps that's what makes these stories so powerful. They invite us to imagine, to empathize, and to confront the shadows in our own lives. So, as we continue, remember that haunted houses are more than just settings for ghost stories. They are mirrors reflecting our hopes, fears, and the mysteries that make us human. They remind us that even in the darkest places, there is always a glimmer of light, a chance to understand, to heal, and to find meaning in the unknown. If you've ever lived in an old house, you know that every creak and groan can set your imagination racing. But for those who have truly experienced a haunting, the fear is not just in the mind, it's in the air, the walls, the very bones of the house. It's the feeling that you're never really alone, that something unseen is sharing your space, watching, waiting. And sometimes, the most terrifying part is not what you see, but what you feel. Let's revisit the Ramirez family in Texas. After they moved, they tried to put the past behind them, but the memory of the crying child lingered. Sophia, once a bright and talkative girl, became quiet and withdrawn. Her parents noticed she would avoid small, enclosed spaces, and she refused to sleep with the door closed. One night, her mother found her sitting on the floor of her new bedroom, tracing patterns on the carpet with her finger. When asked what she was doing, Sophia whispered, "I'm making sure he can't find me." Her parents never pressed her for details, but they kept a nightlight on in her room, just in case. Contrast this with Margaret's experience in Virginia. The dinner parties became a cherished tradition, a way to honor the past and embrace the present. Margaret began inviting friends over on Sunday evenings, sharing the story of the spectral guests and the laughter that echoed through the house. Some of her friends were skeptical, but others claimed to hear the music and voices, even catching glimpses of figures in the candlelight. The farmhouse became a place of gathering, a bridge between worlds. Margaret often said that the house felt lighter, happier, as if the spirits were grateful to be remembered. But not all hauntings offer comfort. For Olivia, the woman with the portrait, the fear followed her long after she left the house. She developed a habit of checking over her shoulder, especially in dimly lit hallways. She avoided antique shops and old houses, afraid of seeing that familiar, watchful gaze. Even in her dreams, the woman in black would appear, standing at the end of a long corridor, her eyes never leaving Olivia's. Therapy helped her process the trauma, but the sense of being watched never fully faded. Sometimes, Olivia wondered if the haunting was less about the house and more about the secrets it kept. The Millers, after their ordeal with the locked room and the broken doll, tried to rebuild their lives in a new town. Ethan, once a playful and curious child, became anxious and withdrawn. He refused to play with dolls or stuffed animals, and he developed a fear of closets and closed doors. His parents sought help from counselors and child psychologists, but the nightmares persisted. Ethan would wake up screaming, insisting that the doll was still looking for him. The family learned to live with the fear, creating new routines and rituals to help Ethan feel safe. But the past was never far behind. Daniel and Chris, haunted by the man in the mirror, found themselves questioning their own perceptions. Was it a ghost, a trick of the light, or something deeper, a manifestation of their own fears and anxieties? They tried to move on, but the experience left a mark. Daniel became hyper-aware of his surroundings, always checking mirrors and windows for signs of movement. Chris became more protective, insisting on keeping the lights on at night. Their friends teased them, but the fear was real, a constant reminder that some mysteries can't be explained away. Jamie, the college student, turned her fear into creativity. She started writing stories and poems about her experiences, sharing them online with others who had lived through similar hauntings. She found comfort in community, connecting with people who understood the feeling of being watched, the unease that lingers long after the lights go out. The humming in her new apartment became a source of inspiration, a reminder that even the scariest stories can be transformed into something beautiful. And then there are the stories that remain untold, the families who move out in the dead of night, too afraid to speak of what they've seen. The children who grow up with secrets, never sure if what they remember was real or just a dream. The houses that sit empty, their windows dark, waiting for someone new to cross the threshold. What ties all these stories together is the sense of the unknown, the feeling that there is more to the world than what we can see or touch. Haunted houses remind us that history is alive, that the past can reach out and touch the present in ways we can't always understand. They force us to confront our deepest fears, of being alone, of being watched, of being powerless. But they also remind us of our resilience. Every person in these stories found a way to move forward, to reclaim their lives from the grip of fear. Some found comfort in ritual, others in research, and still others in community. They learned to live with the unknown, to accept that some questions may never have answers. As you listen to these stories, you might find yourself wondering, what would I do if it happened to me? Would I stay and fight, or would I run? Would I try to explain it away, or would I accept the possibility of something beyond my understanding? There are no easy answers, but perhaps that's what makes these stories so powerful. They invite us to imagine, to empathize, and to confront the shadows in our own lives. So, as we continue, remember that haunted houses are more than just settings for ghost stories. They are mirrors reflecting our hopes, fears, and the mysteries that make us human. They remind us that even in the darkest places, there is always a glimmer of light, a chance to understand, to heal, and to find meaning in the unknown. If you're still listening, you might be wondering why these stories matter, why we return to them again and again, even when they make us uneasy. The truth is, haunted house stories are never just about ghosts. They're about the way we process fear, the way we hold on to memories, and the way we search for meaning in the unknown. They're about the places we call home and the secrets those places keep. Let's revisit the house on Willow Lane one last time. After years of sitting empty, the house was finally purchased by a young couple eager to start a family. They knew nothing of its history, only that it was a bargain and had good bones. For a while, everything was perfect. They painted the walls, planted flowers, and filled the rooms with laughter. But soon, the old patterns returned. The footsteps at 3:13 a.m., the flickering lights, the sense of being watched. The couple tried to ignore it, but the tension grew. Arguments became more frequent, and sleep became elusive. One night, the wife woke to find her husband standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door to their daughter's room. When she asked what he was doing, he simply said, "She's not alone in there." They moved out within the month, leaving the house empty once again. Contrast that with Margaret's farmhouse, where the haunting became a source of connection. Over time, Margaret's Sunday dinners became legendary in the small town. Neighbors and friends would gather, sharing stories and laughter, always leaving a place at the table for the unseen guests. The house seemed to glow with warmth, the past and present blending together in a way that felt almost magical. Margaret often said that the spirits had taught her to cherish every moment, to honor the memories that make a house a home. But for others, the haunting is a wound that never heals. Olivia, haunted by the portrait, found herself unable to form close relationships. She became wary of trust, always expecting betrayal or disappointment. The fear that had started in the hallway of her great-aunt's house followed her into adulthood, shaping her choices and her sense of self. She wondered if the woman in black was a warning, a reminder that some doors should never be opened. The Millers, after their ordeal with the locked room, became advocates for mental health awareness. They shared their story with others, hoping to break the stigma around trauma and anxiety. Ethan, with the help of therapy and a supportive community, slowly began to heal. He learned to face his fears, to talk about the things that scared him, and to find strength in vulnerability. The family's journey was not easy, but it was a testament to the power of resilience. Daniel and Chris, after leaving the house with the man in the mirror, started a podcast about the paranormal. They interviewed others who had experienced hauntings, sharing stories and exploring the mysteries of the unknown. The podcast became a way to process their own fear, to connect with others, and to find meaning in the inexplicable. They discovered that they were not alone, that countless others had faced the same questions, the same doubts, the same chills in the night. Jamie, the college student, published a collection of short stories inspired by her experiences. The book found a small but devoted audience, and Jamie received letters from readers all over the world, sharing their own haunted house stories. She realized that the act of telling her story had transformed her fear into something powerful, a way to connect, to heal, and to inspire. And then there are the stories that remain in the shadows, whispered from one generation to the next. The houses that sit empty, their windows dark, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The families who carry their secrets in silence, never sure if what they remember was real or just a dream. The children who grow up with a sense of unease, always looking over their shoulders, always wondering what might be lurking just out of sight. What ties all these stories together is the sense of the unknown, the feeling that there is more to the world than what we can see or touch. Haunted houses remind us that history is alive, that the past can reach out and touch the present in ways we can't always understand. They force us to confront our deepest fears of being alone, of being watched, of being powerless. But they also remind us of our resilience. Every person in these stories found a way to move forward, to reclaim their lives from the grip of fear. Some found comfort in ritual, others in research, and still others in community. They learned to live with the unknown, to accept that some questions may never have answers. As you listen to these stories, you might find yourself wondering, what would I do if it happened to me? Would I stay and fight, or would I run? Would I try to explain it away, or would I accept the possibility of something beyond my understanding? There are no easy answers, but perhaps that's what makes these stories so powerful. They invite us to imagine, to empathize, and to confront the shadows in our own lives. So, as we near the end of our journey, remember that haunted houses are more than just settings for ghost stories. They are mirrors reflecting our hopes, fears, and the mysteries that make us human. They remind us that even in the darkest places, there is always a glimmer of light, a chance to understand, to heal, and to find meaning in the unknown. As our night together draws to a close, you might find yourself glancing at the corners of your room, listening for the faintest sound, or feeling the weight of a story that refuses to let go. That's the true power of a haunted house tale. It lingers, it echoes, it makes you question what you thought you knew about the world and about yourself. Maybe you'll sleep with the lights on tonight, or maybe you'll find comfort in the knowledge that you're not alone in your curiosity, your fear, or your wonder. The stories you've heard tonight are more than just accounts of the supernatural. They are reminders that every house has a history, every family has secrets, and every person carries memories that shape the spaces they inhabit. Whether the hauntings are real or imagined, whether the spirits are echoes of the past or projections of our deepest anxieties, the effect is the same. We are changed by the stories we tell and the stories we believe. If you take anything from these 10 haunted house stories, let it be this: fear is not always something to be banished. Sometimes it's a guide, a signal that there is more to discover, more to understand, more to feel. The unknown is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the invitation. The invitation to look closer, to listen harder, to honor the mysteries that make life and death so endlessly fascinating. So tonight, as you turn off your screen and settle into bed, remember the footsteps in the hallway, the laughter in the dining room, the portrait's watchful eyes, and the humming in the dark. Remember the families who found strength in each other, the children who faced their fears, and the storytellers who turned their nightmares into something that could be shared, understood, and maybe even healed. And if you find yourself lying awake, heart pounding, shadows dancing on the walls, know that you are part of a long tradition, a tradition of wonder, of fear, of storytelling. You are not alone. Somewhere, someone else is listening, remembering, and maybe, just maybe, leaving a light on. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have your own haunted house story, I invite you to share it. Your voice might be the one that helps someone else feel a little less alone in the dark. Until next time, keep your mind open, your heart brave, and your lights, well, that's up to you. Good night.